A tomato.
Rowan is a tomato. I mean,
No.
draws a tomato.
Yes. Rowan draws a tomato. I was a potato.
I was a potato. You're a tomato.
So, at like 3 in the morning, I had this idea that I decided was brilliant because it was 3 in the morning. There is no other way it is brilliant. But I became invested enough in the idea that I texted you at like 5:30 in the morning.
Draw a tomato.
That specifically a tomato in lingerie, and it was going to be like the word intimate, but tomato.
I do in tomato. Yeah, I responded to that. You're gonna do a whole tomato style comic.
Right. Which I did wind up doing, but not like that. I wound up doing something else with it instead. But I had to draw the tomato first, and I thought, wouldn't it be funnier if I actually, like, gave a hoot?
Didn't pollute.
And actually, like, put some effort in and didn't just do... Because I could have just done red blob with stem. And I decided to do more than that.
Yeah, just the change of the stem is what changes it from apple to tomato, really.
Yeah.
Changing the stem. But, side note, because we used it as a joke in the beginning, I don't know if, like, calling women a tomato is vernacular outside of Burke Breathe comics.
I don't know.
I've only seen it in Bloom County, but I loved Bloom County, so I assumed he got it from somewhere.
Well, I've heard... I only ever heard it with a heavy New York accent, calling somebody like a tomato.
Hot tomato.
Yeah. She's a tomato. But I don't know what that means. And I don't know if it's... I don't think it's still used. I don't think
It's just a basic noun. It's just like, oh, they're beautiful. But she sure is a fire hydrant.
Right. It's an old one. And I don't know that it's still a thing. Except in Bloom County. But
Props to Burke Breathe for keeping it alive.
Yeah. That was clearly important.
Yeah.
Now it is red.
Oh, that's a very red tomato.
That's how it started.
That's super ripe.
Oh, and I did have reference material, but they were all too perfect. Every single one I looked at was like perfect shade of red with no blemishes, no orange, no green to it. And that they didn't... all of the photographs of actual tomatoes I saw didn't look real to me. If you know what I mean.
The hyper real. A lot of produce gets like shot hyper real, where it's just the contrast is just being up to 1,000.
And only the most perfect side. But I wanted more of a still life, and we don't currently have tomatoes from our garden, so I made it up. I technically had references in front of me and wound up ignoring most of the references.
Tomatoes from our garden also tend to be the smaller variety.
Like cherry
We
tomatoes.
don't tend to make the like beef eaters.
No. I also worked with the shading and the like highlights of it, the lighting, at the same time as the color, which isn't necessarily the best route, but I was trying to be painterly about it. So
It's very much a painted tomato. This is the first time seeing the process, because while you were doing this, I think I was elbow deep in another project that required me to use headphones. So
no, you were not there.
Yeah, I didn't get to come check over, but I remember when you first posted the tomato on like social media, I'm like, I thought it was a photo.
I appreciate that. That
So
was
it's
sweet.
it's so marvelous to see the process of you just like putting in the shadow and the highlights and smudging everything together and just...
This was an hour and a half of my life to do this tomato. For a joke. For a joke that doesn't even make sense. But it made sense to me at 3 in the morning.
It was a pun. It was a series of puns.
Is it even a pun at that point?
Yeah, if you merge words, it's a pun.
It's not very funny. But
There are two types of puns. There's stating something where one word is actually the other meaning of it, and there's just merging words together so that they mean both and neither. Those are both puns.
for a second, this tomato looks kind of rotten. But
Well, it's the darkness, but you shine it up later.
Yeah, the trick is also whether it's green in a bruised way, or just green in an unripe way.
It just looks almost overripe right now.
Yeah, smushy.
Like I can feel the squish of that tomato.
And I wanted to change the shape, so I had to go back to that gray layer. So I sketched it out, and I did the rough shape of it, and then I made a clipping mask so that I was only drawing on top of that shape. Which meant if I wanted to change the shape, I had to go back to that first gray chunk and smush it around and figure out where I actually wanted things to go.
I'm hungry for tomatoes now.
I do appreciate the love this tomato got. And
Well, it really shows your talent that you took a simple everyday object and you realized it in such a way that like it looks like a photo, but it also looks almost too real.
I appreciate that. It was not the easiest thing to draw. And here I'm fixing up the highlights and making them a little bit more pronounced.
More under the grocery store lamps.
Yeah. A little more intense. Because contrast is key. In high school, my favorite teacher always tried to tell me to push it. You know, the lights and the darks to really push my work. And I did not understand at the time what that meant. But now I think I kind of get it.
Now you've salt and peppered. You push it.
Salt and pepper.
Push it good.
Pepper. But yeah. So this goes on for a little while as I smudge around.
Just mixing all the colors.
Yeah. Just trying to find a good texture of things, and I didn't want to lose all the color underneath. I wanted it to stick around.
Yeah. You still want it to be a nice red tomato.
Right.
It's just got to have some shine to it because it's got a glossy skin.
And the difference between tomato and apple is, like you said, stem and also certain amounts of the butt, the bottom, whether it has like its own little feet to sit on or it's just rounded. Because if this were an apple, I would have done a slightly different shape. But it's a tomato.
With a pointier butt, it would be an apple.
Yeah.
Pointier butt, different stem.
Yeah.
But both fruits.
Yeah. One is much mushier than the other.
Ketchup is a vegetable.
No.
According.
For much of my life, much of my childhood at least, I could not have ketchup. Couldn't have tomatoes. Tomatoes made me kind of sick.
Did you eat them off of lead plates? Because the Romans made that mistake too.
No, it was just tomatoes in general. Which was a shame because I loved pizza. Like for my birthday, I never wanted cake. I always wanted pizza, and then I'd feel really gross afterwards. But thankfully, modern technology, I had the sublingual allergy drops for like 5 years, and now I can eat tomatoes, and wheat, and rye, and oat,
Yeah.
and barley. That was the other one. Soy used to be worse. There were a lot of foods I couldn't have, and in retrospect, it's, oh, that's why I was underweight. That's why I felt crappy all of the time. Because the concept of, oh, your kid has this many food intolerances, that's just nonsense. No one can be intolerant to that many foods and survive.
You can only have one.
Yeah.
Don't be selfish. Save them for the other children.
Like, I still have my scary food allergies, but in terms of the things that just made me kind of yugi, mostly good now. Mostly okay.
Good.
Which is much better. And now I can...
It's always good to be less frightened of food.
Yeah. And now I can draw a tomato.
Is good tomato.
I wanted that shine to be as correct as possible. And again, I wasn't really using a reference that had the shine I wanted. Kids use references. Don't be like me.
References are good for art.
Yes. And they make life easier. So much easier. But
It's such a good tomato.
Thank you. I wanted it to look as real as I was willing to do in the time allotted, because again, this took an hour and a half, and I didn't want to spend any more than that. I didn't want my entire day to be devoted to tomato. And it's just floating in space. If I had put it on a table, I would have wanted the color of whatever the table was to kind of reflect into the bottom of the tomato, and vice versa. And I would have played with that, but this is just floating in a void.
Well, it's a really good void. So if you are a representative of the National Association of Tomato Farmers and you want to license this image for your ad campaign, at Art of Our Own Gold.
Yeah, it's not doing anything else. Might as well be useful. And I could do other fruits and vegetables. I won't draw nuts though. Just won't do it.
Just on principle. I wouldn't endorse a product I can't use.
Yeah, you know?
Yeah. No, I get it.
And I did realize at some point that the teamish darkness in the middle looks a little bit not only like a bruise but like a dent, and I didn't want that either. So eventually I fixed that. I don't know when, but I remember doing it. So
it gets later, yeah.
It does. It shapes it like it shapes itself. I shape it differently later.
The picture is letting you know how to shape it, like the marble. The marble knows what it wants to be.
I wanted it to be round as possible.
I learned or relearned, because I forget if I knew this before, that Michelangelo's David was made out of junk marble. And that's part of why it's so hard to keep up, because it's super porous.
Because it's just garbage.
It's just garbage marble.
Oh, I love
like,
that.
it was just other artists had started to carve it and been like, no, this is junk. And it's like one of the most recognizable pieces of art. And like the poor people in charge of it have to be like, okay, we have to clean this garbage marble again.
Also uses forced perspective, which is cool. Oh, there's my tomato.
Look at that.
Actually didn't fix it as much as I thought. Maybe I should go back in and...
No, that's good. You leave it.
Okay.
That's a perfect tomato.
Okay.
Because tomatoes have that, like... They're almost more transparent than apples if you look at them the right way. Like, you can see that the
That's true.
insides are... There it is.
This is what I did with it. The one actually on the House Bright Adorable, like where the comic is going to be and in the book, is just black and white. But I did do the thing in color.
That's having an affair with the cucumber.
Yeah. I'm glad that reads as a cucumber.
Where's the Let's Play of the cucumber?
Well, the cucumber took about 5 minutes.
What?
The cucumber was very easy in the grand scheme.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I was not going for detail in the cucumber.
Intimidado.
This is the most stupid.
Good job.
Thank you for watching. Rock on.
Rock on. Go eat a tomato.